She played a leading role. She has been playing a leading role for the ISJKM from the very beginning. She was president from 2009 until 2011. And she's also a translator of the famous book by Otsuka Keisetsu Sensei, A Clinical Guide to Theory and Practice. And I just heard that the second edition is now available. So those who don't have the book yet, please get a copy of it. And I pass now on to Gretchen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know you're a mixed audience, and some of you know everything about the Fukushin, and other people don't know what it is. So I'm going to go step by step. Those of you who already know what I'm talking about will find there's more information on the slide than I'm saying orally. And those of you who can barely keep up, just try to listen, because I'm going to abbreviate the slides. So here we go with the first one. I did the pointer. All right. This is what we mean by the Fukushin. And I'm aiming to tell you why this simple book has such a big impact. And I hope to persuade you that a small variation in the way the book was presented was responsible for its huge impact. Can you hear me? This is the equivalent of taking a mysterious and powerful book like the Bible, which was written in Latin, and putting it into common language, and from that common language it moves to England, and another common language, and sparks a revolution, and all of England is changed. I'm going to explain to you why I think all of Kampo was changed by small variations in this text. Don't want again. Let's hope we're right. So the easiest way to do this is to use the methodology of someone who's already introduced the methodology. So I've chosen a French historian, Roger Cartier. He's well respected. Possibly you already know about him. The reason that Fukushokiran is so important is it has a very long history of publication. The first attempt to publish the book was in the 1700s by its author, Inaba Bunrei, and in 1853, long after he died, his followers were still producing variations of this same text. It fits Cartier's picture because we can identify an author, we have the materiality of the books, we have an identifiable script, and we have readers who can be traced through their usage of the book. Additionally, Fukushokiran is full of illustrations, and the illustrations are, I'm going the wrong way again. The illustrations are remarkable in that they are all very simple. They seem to depict a kind of peasant utopia. These are the publications I investigated. If you're interested in seeing the international scope of the book, but I'm going to talk about each of them separately as we go along. So here we go, our findings on the materiality of the book. The book is published in a very typical kind of publication for the Edo period. You can see it's called Fukurotoji. The book is written on paper which is folded over, and it's bound by thread in the corner. These are very cheap to produce, very small, lightweight, flexible books. And as a mark of their popularity, you can see in the back of the book we have adverts. These adverts are interesting in themselves because you can see that there are other books being studied or being offered by the publishers, such as a book on the pox. There's several books on the Shanhan Lun coming up, or lectures, and many of the things that we were told were secrets or things that were not shared are actually advertised in this book. So it may change our idea of how secret Kampo medicine actually was. Then we have a different kind of book, and the reason this is important is this was Inaba Bunrei's first attempt to publish the book. As you can see, the book is written on paper which is folded over, and it's bound by thread in the corner. These are very cheap to produce, very small, lightweight, flexible books. And as a mark of their popularity, you can see in the back of the book we have adverts. These adverts are interesting in themselves because you can see that there are other books being studied or being offered by the publishers, such as a book on the pox. There's several books on the Shanhan Lun coming up, or lectures, and many of the things that we were told were secrets or things that were not shared are actually advertised in this book. So it may change our idea of how secret Kampo medicine actually was. it's not a good block print. It was probably dictated to one of his students and written down word by word, just as he said it orally. Each kanji is separately written. There are no reading marks or anything to help the reader understand the book unless they were fluent in kanji. The pictures looked very Chinese and not very accommodating, and the book was a flop. Nobody wanted to buy it, and Bunwei fell into a fit of depression. Corresponding to that is Bunwei's meeting of a group of publishers who began publishing the book in this format. This book here is the same book as the book I showed you with the adverts from the Library of Berlin. This is the end page. There's no adverts in this book. So each publication seems to be slightly geared towards a certain market, although the information in the book, in the woodblock prints, seems to be identical. A Keio Medical Library, they have one edition listed. When I went in to look at them, each one of these large boxes is full of 5 or 10 different manuscripts with the same volume or sometimes different editions all mixed up together. There's a very large volume in the British Library, which is published in 1853, and in this book all of the smaller books have been compressed into one large volume. This volume is a hardback book, very thick, very difficult to carry, and it is throughout this book, through all the editions I looked at, there is no indication that anyone ever owned this book other than the British Library. There are no name stamps, there's no page turning marks or anything like this. And a similar book to this has a known provenance in the UCL collection by a man named William Randolph. Randolph said he went to Japan to buy curios, and he went into a bookshop and he was handed this book. So this makes this kind of book very different from the small handbooks that we looked at before, which were intended for individual users. So, the National Diet Library has a copy of this book which looked exactly like the welcome copy, but the information on the book says it was only, it was only published in 1937. Even so, it was made to look exactly like the older book, and it still has copyright, so we're not allowed to either look at it or get an image of it. Then in 1980, a member of JSOM and Kampo practitioner and Dr. Yakazu, his cohort or his colleague, published this edition, translating it into modern readable Japanese. So there is a book available for those who want to read it in Japanese. Now, in summary, from looking at these books themselves, I would say that the early editions on Fukuro Toji, on plain paper, had no decoration. They were very economical. They were lightweight and portable. They could have been used as handbooks. Editions, all editions include the information from the earlier material. They call the writer as Inaba Bunrei, and they mention his sort of companion Wakata. And the last book, the pre-modern text, seems to have been available as a library copy or a trade product. So, on we go. Talking about the script of the books. There are two kinds of reading marks in these books. Some of them, Professor Winchell has already showed you those, but we'll look at them in detail here. These marks here, the little marks, those function more like punctuation in English, the way a capital letter is a signal that we're beginning a new sentence, a comma separates phrases, a period tells us one phrase is finished, another phrase is beginning. Those are simply reading marks for people who can already read but would like to structure Chinese text according to Japanese language readings. So those are reading marks for the literate reader. There's another kind of mark here. These little, whoops, I've done it again, going the wrong way. Can we go back? Yeah. These reading marks are actually phonetic guides to tell you how to pronounce a word if you can't read. So if you knew the alphabet and you could speak with these little marks, you're able to pronounce the word and to make sense of a book without being able to read it. Those are a kind of script. They're not a reading mark. They are actually a pronunciation guide. So this is an important distinction. Now, the unique mark of these books is that the pronunciation guide occurs on almost every word. So that would mean even if you couldn't recognize this character was the same character you saw 2 lines before, you would still be able to speak the book and say the book aloud. So this is a way to make a written book an oral book. Now, just to let you know, all books in the Edo period are not written like that. This is a book of manual practitioners. You can see there's a wide variety of scripts. Some of the small letters appear, but some of these things are basically a kind of script you would learn in school. So if you hadn't been to school, you wouldn't be able to read that. Now, this is the book by Todo Yoshimasu. This is also significant. You can see some reading marks here. But this reading mark, which occurs here with this kanji, isn't repeated when the same kanji comes up later. That's because once he's told you how to read that or how to pronounce that word, he expects you to remember that by the time you get to line 8. So little by little you develop a vocabulary which allows you to read a very difficult text. This is for people who can read. That's the important point. So Bunrei, who spoke his first book to his first student, said, I trust the oral tradition. I want to write a book where people who can't read can learn medicine. He didn't say, you don't need a book. He said, you don't need to be able to read the book. You can speak the book. So the early editions of the Fukusho Kiran tried to preserve this oral tradition and give the book a wider scope. Conclusion is that people who looked at the early books were users of books rather than what we all call readers of the book. Reader being traditional people, users being people who could recognize alphabet and speak a language. So speakers of abdominal exam teaching is who this book is written for. Now, we do know something about the users of the book. So we're looking for evidence of users' activity in the manuscripts. We're looking for evidence of page turns, notations in the margins, signs of ownership, for example, the red stamp you have when you have your own book. And here we have user activity in the KO manuscript. You can see here 2 different books, user 1107 and user 1106. Now, this book has a stamp that shows it belonged to someone. Someone put their name stamp in this book. But you can see they haven't got any other marks of using this book. This book here has no owner, but plenty of usage. In fact, I'll show you some more differences here. This is the 2 books, 1117 and 1106, side by side. I'm going to show you what happened when I opened the books and started to look. We see over here, this kanji is annotated different to this kanji. Sorry, I seem to have developed a shape here. This kanji has more reading marks than that one, more reading marks here than here, and throughout the text, every kanji has a reading, and these ones have more readings. That would mean the person who took up this book needed more help to say the words in the book than the other reader. I don't know if he wrote these in by hand, or that's because I only discovered this after I had left the text of the book at home. I don't know if he wrote them in by hand or if 2 editions existed published simultaneously, one for more fluent readers and one for other readers, or if they read it together in a study group, and the study group spoke it orally and he added his own readings, but certainly these were 2 different kinds of readers. So the summary of this is there's abundant activity of users in the KO manuscripts. User 1106 added his own kana. He added his own script to not only difficult words, but to almost every word. User 1107 marked various editions with his ownership stamp. But we would have to look at all of his ownership stamps closer to see if he simply skipped the beginning pages of all the books and moved into the later editions which compiled everything. But he seems not to have opened this book at all. And we can also say that people who needed help speaking the book added extra kana script to make it an oral learning book. So the author, who was Inaba Bunrei, who was proclaimed on the title as the writer of the book. Well, we have other information about who the writer may have been, because at the end of each book, other people are credited. From 1833, Wakata was credited, and then these two Harada clan members began to say that they had written the book. Only Wakata and Bunrei appear as persons in the texts. Bunrei and Wakata are said to have met each other as like-minded people and got together to write the book. And the autobiography of Inaba Bunrei becomes a kind of narrative within the book. So we feel as though we know who Inaba Bunrei was and what his motive was for writing, because it tells us a little story about him in the opening pages. So could the author, Inaba Bunrei, have existed according to the things that we're told? The source of the information on Inaba Bunrei is the autobiographical introduction to the text, plus his pupils who were with him made a contemporaneous testimony, like I saw Bunrei yesterday and he had a stroke and he was walking like this, or Bunrei is, as he says, a kind of villain, a man of disreputable behavior who had a kind of inspiration, and despite his life as an orphan and illiterate and an alcoholic and lacking graces, became a practitioner of medicine. Inaba declares himself to be a wandering doctor, an illiterate who was mocked by the physicians of Kyoto who were better educated. But he said, like him, you don't have to read. You can learn things orally the way I have. I'll speed up then. Now, I've looked to see if there were any other people such as Bunrei in Edo at the time, to see if it's possible that such a creature could have existed. And I find three references. One is a populist movement. One is a contemporary novel satirizing doctors. You'll see this. So there was a kind of charismatic fellow called Ishada Beiguan. He was, as you can see, alive at the same time as Inaba. He said he learned medicine, or he learned special things from listening at temples. He had an experience in epiphany, and he never needed to read books because he had a pure heart. Sorry, this man had a... We go on. His biography is very similar to another popular movement. And then, this is very interesting, there was a book called Ishadangi, which satirizes doctors. And the doctors that they satirize looked very much like Inaba Bunrei. Especially this pun they made. I think as Umutuli said, it's not unusual for people to make puns. They named the doctors Kusai. So we had Chikusai, Bokusai. But Kusai in Japanese means smelly. So this is smelly doctor and pretty smelly doctor. But Inaba tells us that his teacher was Tokuhon, and Tokuhon's nickname was Chikusai. So it looks like this man here, who's being satirized, was in fact the person that Inaba was claiming to have studied with. And Chikusai had his tablets, and these tablets were offered for sale inside of the book. So we have a feeling that such doctors did exist because they were subject of the satire of more educated people. All right, so such persons such as Inaba could have existed. Fukusho Kiran was Inaba's third attempt at publication. It only worked when his more literate pupils transformed his book into a kind of speaking book. Now, I'll tell you a little about the illustrations. We'll go through really quickly. there's many themes in this book which don't look like Fukushima. This seems to say, respect your elders and use Matsubushkin. This one seems to come from a kind of fear of death and signs of death picture, not about Fukushima. And this one, really, is it a anatomical withdrawing? We don't know, but in later days, the book kept up with medicine by adding new themes, and that's part of its enduring theme. So, the other thing which I think is quite important is there are only 5 or 6 drawings in the entire book that have anything to demonstrate with Fukushima. This one, obviously, is not going to tell you how to diagnose a patient. The next one didn't help either. I think I've lost a slide there. But the other, basically, you could not have learned to diagnose the abdomen from this textbook alone. So, analysis of findings is the books. They were cheap and handbooks. Later they became trade products. The script was made to attract people who could speak but not read. Readers were users, not readers. The author was a familiar construct of a pre-modern outsider, and contemporary literature is full of such references. The illustrations speak of the virtues of the commoner class, and there are no effective performative gestures which would allow you to do Fukushima using this book alone. So, analysis of findings, that's nothing that you couldn't guess from what I said. So, does anyone have any questions?